Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Welcome, one and all, to the Foreign Correspondents Club and to this special lunch where we aim to establish how safe is your digital currency. Just a few housekeeping matters just to start with. Please switch off all your devices. And to remind you, upcoming events tomorrow, we have another club lunch featuring several of our prominent consul generals in Hong Kong called Pride Around the World, a global look at marriage equality, topical subject considering the discussions that have been going on through LegCo. On October the 20th, we have a screening of a film, Draw for Change, Episode 3, which is a film which covers an artist chronicling Putin's Russia. And on October the 22nd, we will be welcoming back Matthew Marsh for another of his regular discussions on Formula One. But also of relevance and quite a way forward, on October the 27th, we'll be hosting a discussion on the power of the digital underworld and the role of crypto in influencing political discussions through things like funding the far right. Will you come back for that one? Okay, so on to today's subject. Andrew is here. Unfortunately, Collingwood, his colleague, was delayed in London through a legal issue, but we're in capable hands of Andrew Wheeler, KC. He is head of the financial crime team at 7BR Chambers in London. Andrew was called to the bar in 1988 and took silk in 2017. He has extensive experience in areas such as serious fraud, money laundering, and proceeds of criminal confiscation in the UK and other jurisdictions, including Hong Kong. Financial fraud in the crypto world is a massively complicated area, but Andrew is referenced in Chambers Legal 500 as having an ability to cut through to the real issues in a case in a short space of time. How extremely useful to have you here for that.
I wrote that myself.
Andrew, thanks very much for joining us. Crypto, security of it, I mean, it's ever topical. I don't know how many people here have been involved and invested in crypto, but with Zemin Chang case coming through the courts in London and that becoming a geopolitical issue with Rachel Reeves and the Chinese government bartering about who's going to pay it when it could help fill the black hole. Andrew, fill us in on crypto fraud.
How can I follow that? Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you everybody for coming. We're just going to have a quick look today, hopefully a sort of light-hearted, high-level look at how vulnerable cryptocurrency is to criminal activity. And in respect of three, I suppose, different ways. One is converting the proceeds of criminal activity, whatever it is, into cryptocurrency. That's one vulnerability. A second one is a vulnerability to hacking, to theft. That's the most complex one, really, where individuals or companies manage to hack into someone's cryptocurrency exchange or wallet and steal it from quite literally under their nose. That takes a bit of nous. The third one, which is effectively scamming, applies as much to crypto as it does to any other type of scamming. So every time you get an email or a WhatsApp message or a text asking you to phone this number, or you've had a parcel that hasn't been delivered, the same thing really applies to crypto. So we're going to start really with the conversion into crypto from the proceeds of crime. And it's interesting that Tim should mention the case of Tien. Because a week last Monday at a Crown Court in London, she pleaded guilty to money laundering. On the face of it, nothing unusual about that. The sums involved are eye-watering. There are 61,500 bitcoins seized by the police in the UK, now worth over 5 million UK pounds, 5 billion UK pounds, thank you, or 6 to 7 million US dollars. It's of a type on its own. That is restrained at the moment by the UK authorities. Well, we can wind the story back a little bit to 2014, because between 2014 and 2017, as most people here know, there was a huge Ponzi fraud conducted in mainland China by her and other colleagues. It was about $4 billion worth of Ponzi fraud. Investors were persuaded to invest into non-existent crypto schemes, not the currency itself, but mining machines, insurance policies, and so forth. It roped in absolutely everybody, from dignitaries through to lawyers, through to the police. Everyone invested. The whole thing collapsed in 2017. Others were arrested and eventually convicted in China and sentenced to terms of imprisonment. But by then, Qian had disappeared. She reinvented herself using 2 fake passports and arrived in the UK, I think, either back end of 2017 or 2018, where she teamed up with a lady called Jian Wen, who previously worked for and lived above a takeaway restaurant. She was taken on by Qian to effectively be her second in command. And for the next couple of years, the two of them went around Europe busily trying to convert the Bitcoin that had been seized, it had been transferred into Bitcoin, convert it into sort of tangible assets. Started all right. They bought some low-level jewelry and other paintings, furnishings, and so forth, bought some low-level property, but then decided that they would buy property valued tens of millions of pounds and use the Bitcoin to try and purchase it. Naturally, that tipped off the police as part of the AML conveyancing issues. The police became aware, they became suspicious, and they raided the address where Wen and Qian were living. They arrested Wen. Qian was nowhere to be seen. They weren't even particularly looking for her at that stage. So fast forward a couple of years, and eventually they found Qian. She was arrested. The police had managed by then to crack into computers and other USB devices that they'd found at the premises when they raided it. And now the police themselves had possession of this computer device with this huge amount of Bitcoins on. Everyone thought there was going to be a trial, but as I say, a week last Monday, there wasn't. And pleas of guilty now by all persons involved have been taken. Sentencing, I think, in November. But it has caused a massive problem because in China, there are 128,000 victims who've lost out, some not that much, but a lot of people have lost their life savings. But that money is restrained and frozen in the UK. It's frozen under the terms of a civil recovery application for a freezing order. And what that means is if the government, through the Crown Prosecution Service in this case, can prove that the proceeds of crime are reflected by that 61,500 Bitcoins, the 5 billion UK pounds, then all of the money goes to the Treasury. Sometimes they split it, sometimes between the Treasury and the investigating forces, but it stays basically with the authorities in the UK. Now, I've been involved in this investigation a couple of times along the timeline of the investigation, and it's very, very difficult. There is a treaty between China and the UK which allows, in criminal cases, evidential sharing, but also asset sharing. But that would have to be done at government level. So at the moment, nobody quite knows how it's going to pan out. As Tim says, will the UK government effectively snatch the £5 billion? Well, that will cause a diplomatic incident. Is it all going to be repatriated to China? If so, how? At the moment, they've invited any person who's lost any money to come forward and state their claim, but the logistics of 128,000 people is very difficult, so we'll watch this space. So that's really an example of monies from the proceeds of crime being converted into cryptocurrency and the value having gone up dramatically, and that's a bit of a feature. The second way, as I mentioned, is the hacking way, which is by far the most sophisticated, where the scammers try and hack into the wallets and steal via the private keys the cryptocurrency they're in. Now, I was this time not indirectly involved, but directly involved in the UK's first true cryptocurrency theft, which was tried back in 2023, a couple of years ago, and related to thefts which took place quite literally overnight in January 2018. And we represented a PhD student at Oxford University, a Dutch national in his 40s, who was studying computing. And it was alleged that he had designed a particular program to steal all of this particular currency. It wasn't Bitcoin, it was a currency called IOTA. And how it came about was this: overnight, quite literally, in January 2018, those who had purchased IOTA currency noticed that their accounts had been completely wiped out. It was done so deftly that, and so quietly that people only began to realize when word of mouth got round. And when complaints started to come in from those who'd been affected to a number of different police forces throughout Europe and throughout the world. And to start off with, the investigative authorities couldn't work out what was the connection between all these diverse people from all these diverse jurisdictions who'd lost their cryptocurrency. And after a while, as they began to take the accounts of people who had lost, they realized that all of these people had one thing in common. And it was that they had visited a site called iotaseed.com. Now, IOTA operates in a very similar way to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which is, as well as having your public key, you also have your private key, which is effectively your password to get into your cryptocurrency. Except that in IOTA, they call it a seed rather than a private key. And the seed for IOTA is 81 randomly generated characters, which is peculiar and unique to your private key. Now, someone, and you couldn't make it up, had designed a website whereby you could go on to IOTA Seed, wave your mouse around on your computer screen, and IOTA Seed would randomly generate 81 characters. It sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Because what had happened was whoever had designed that site, in a logo on the site for something called GitHub, which is a site where people who are designing programs and software, they show effectively how that software is being developed so people can keep an eye on it. Within that logo, which was of a cat against a black background, the person who had carried out the theft had put some malicious software within it, so that when the system was live on the internet and an individual waved the mouse around to generate these random 81 characters, in fact, what had happened was the operator of the site supplied a pre-existing list of 81 characters. So whoever had designed and created that site was collecting the private seed key of each and every person that came on that site. Fast forward 9 months when literally thousands of people had used that site, and the criminal, the thief, overnight, using, of course, what he or she already had, which is the key to everybody's IOTA wallet, stripped out the lot. And within 24 hours, all those cryptocurrency had been laundered through two major exchanges, Binance and Bitfinex, with 12 bogus accounts having been set up at those exchanges to receive the stolen funds that had been stolen from the investors. So from the investors overnight, it went to these 12 accounts at two separate exchanges, again in false names. They'd been set up using false IDs. So again, when the police started to investigate it, they could not work out who it was who had actually opened these monies. And from there, from the accounts at Binance and from the accounts at Bitfinex, they were converted into Bitcoin, into the secrecy coin Monero, which made it even more difficult to track. And from there, it literally went round the world. So whoever carried it out had done a pretty sterling job and was clearly pretty much on the ball. So the currency exchanges themselves decided to investigate along with the different police authorities. And they looked at these different false accounts that had been set up into which the money had come. Each of them had not only been set up using false details, but had been set up using a VPN. So in other words, every time when you log on to the internet, as you know, you have an IP address, and the IP address will be recorded. And so whoever's examining the audit trail will know from your IP address where you are, what your machine is, and pretty much it will track you to where you are. So they thought that by looking at that they would get through to the identity of the thief. But the thief had been using a VPN, which distorts your IP address. So the VPN is effectively another layer of security that you go through. And I think this particular one was based in Gibraltar, but made it look like you were logging in Italy. So again, the police hit a brick wall. And whoever it was who had carried out the theft at that stage thought they had actually got away with it. But the police went one layer further down than that. And they looked at all of the other patterns on the use of VPNs at or about that time, not just on the suspect accounts, but throughout the entirety of the exchanges. And they found out that a similar VPN, which itself was quite rare, had been used on one other address, one other account held, I think, at Binance. And they looked into that in greater detail, and again, it was in a false name, but this time, the identity that had been supplied to open that account, you had our client's email address provided as evidence of ID. And as part of that process, he had supplied a picture of himself at his computer desk in Oxford with a big beaming smile looking in the photograph. And literally, that was it. If he hadn't done that, he'd never have been caught. Well, they recognized straight away where the photograph had come from. He was identified, and they raided his premises in Oxford. He had moved rooms, but when they raided his premises, it was a university room, so not huge, but it was absolutely jam-packed full of computers and associated hardware and software, all absolutely locked down. The police never, ever, ever were able to get into them because they were so heavily blocked. But unhappily for him, the computer on which he was working at the time was actually switched on when the police came in, and they were able to seize it from him. And even though he had completely restored the operating system so that it was brand new, what had happened was he'd used that new system, the operating system, at some stage, or he must have done, to actually, by way of the means of a cloud or external hard drive, he'd used it to access external material from obviously stuff that was elsewhere. And on his current computer, therefore, were fragments of pieces of evidence which connected him to the false accounts at the two different exchanges and to the money flows that had gone virtually around the world. So that was really probably the most sort of damning piece of evidence against him, and it began to stack up. And then very finally, without going into all of the other details, the police conducted a tracing exercise using expert clustering, which I'm sure you appreciate is how you track the different cryptocurrencies. It's quite unique. It requires expert evidence. It's very difficult to trace it. They spent 5 years investigating this and tracing it. And in the end, with a whole series of clustering tracing exercise, they were able to point pretty much to the monies that came out of the false accounts within the exchanges into other accounts held by our client. So in the end, quite a compelling picture. His original defense was, I don't know anything about it, which was not good, not a good start, because it was almost like having somebody next to a dead body next to it with a knife covered in blood, saying, well, don't ask me, Governor. So later on, and I'm not portraying any client confidence because this all was played out in open court, his instructions changed to, yes, it was me who set up IOTA Seed, but someone must have hacked my computer, which was a much better defense. Still a difficult one, but actually what it allowed us to do, was to go down the technical side, because even though the evidence was strong, this was the first prosecution, so this was the first time expert evidence of its type, investigation of its evidence of its type had been used. So even though putting it together, it looked quite strong, there were weaknesses, and also it was untested as well. So going from the it wasn't me to actually it was me, but actually someone hacked into my computer and did all of this, caused the prosecution some issues. And it gave us just enough leverage to be able to go to them and suggest, well, actually, do you really want to prosecute this whole case, or can we just compromise on a much smaller part of it, to which they very quickly said yes, for obvious reasons. And so our client went from a very not guilty person to saying, well, I'll tell you how I did it within the space of a few hours. And we resolved it before the judge, and our client was given a sentence of imprisonment, which allowed his return to the country from which he came within a very short space of time. I think he got about 4 years. And because, just like the case of Chien, the Bitcoin and so forth that the police had seized when they seized his computers and stuff, it had gone up so much in value that he was able to pay both confiscation to the state, he was able to pay compensation to the victims that had lost, and he was able to sign away his rights to the rest of the money that the police held. Now, your guess is as good as mine as to whether there's still other stuff out there. I don't know. It's not part of my professional duty to speculate or not. But that was the first case of its type. And I think from both parties took away from that actually these cases are presentable and prosecutable if they are done properly. And if the defense are given a proper opportunity to, again, to investigate and be given the same resources as the prosecution, then I think you can have a fair trial. So that's the second part, and you can see why I say that actually the hacking part of it is probably a lot more sophisticated than the converting from the sheer proceeds of crime into cryptocurrency. The last of the three, and am I okay?
Fine.
Yeah, the last of the three is the scamming, which itself is not sophisticated. And as I said at the beginning, is not confined just to crypto. So you're looking at the phishing type of scamming, where emails, WhatsApps, other types of messages purporting to be from reputable companies, whether they're connected to crypto or they're parcel companies or anything like that, just trying to get you to click on the link or to make contact or return, etc. And then once you're hooked in, then they take your personal details. And allied to that is key logging software. So if you click on the wrong link, you end up with malware downloaded to your device, whether it's your computer or phone. And when that's the case, whenever you use your keyboard, the hacker knows what your keystrokes are and therefore can pretty quickly know what your private key is, because it's being simultaneously relayed to the hacker. And we all know what happens then. Domain spoofing is another one. And in fact, there have been two big ones. One, I think, in and around the Hong Kong area a couple of years ago, where the scammers set up fake websites that look very much like the proper websites, the genuine websites. So, for example, blockchain.com, one scammer set up a site called blockmail.com, but the I in blockchain, the I in blockchain was in fact a number 1 rather than an I. So you wouldn't ordinarily see that, particularly if in a hurry. Anyone who clicked on that, my goodness, they found out to their cost quite a few £1 million on that one. And again, once you're in there and you're entering your personal details, you key, then you get wiped out pretty quickly. Also known as typo squatting as well, just slightly changing the domain address to your cost. Fake support staff, where the attackers contact cryptocurrency holders. They pretend to be support staff at cryptocurrency exchanges. They bombard you with calls, they bombard you with emails, they satisfy you as to the legitimacy of it. It doesn't have to be about cryptocurrency. We're seeing a lot of this where people are pretending to be officials and saying that unless you pay a certain amount of cryptocurrency by a certain date, you're going to be reported to the police. And actually, back in the summer here, I don't know whether you saw it in the press recently, 2 elderly male Hong Kong residents were persuaded by scammers pretending to be officials that unless they made significant payments, they would be in trouble with the criminal authorities. And in fact, they handed over during, I think, June and July of this year, just short of 50 million Hong Kong dollars to the scammers. So that's still outstanding. Penultimately, what I'll call fake investment or fake Ponzi schemes relating to the crypto, either exchanges themselves or crypto currency itself. Usually these are either completely legitimate sites in the sense that they really are virtual asset providers or platforms or exchanges, but it's actually fraud going on behind the scenes. So for all the money that's coming in, yes, it's coming into a proper exchange, but actually it's going out the other way because people are committing fraud. The people responsible for setting up are actually siphoning the money off, and then naturally at some stage the whole thing just collapses. And there are two examples here which I know you'll all be familiar with. 2022, FTX collapsed, leaving a trail of debt, an $8 billion hole rather. Absolutely no substance to it at all. A name you'll probably be familiar with, Sam Bankman-Fried, now serving 25 years in the US for that, and that's still rumbling on. There was someone at a dinner we were at last night who was actually involved in that, and I do mean involved, and I think he was, I don't know whether he was being truthful about it, but I think he said he got pardoned personally by the President, Mr. Trump, but before I had a chance to ask too much further, he was sort of led away. So that's FTX. I think he's probably saying too much. And then the year later in 2023, JPEX again, for which you're familiar, virtual asset platform based in Dubai, but very much promoting services to Hong Kong. Completely unlicensed. Again, money being siphoned off, collapsed inevitably with 1.3 billion losses. So that's even if at the start they are legitimate. And then on the other hand, there are those which are completely illegitimate, such as that, in fact, back end of last year into this year, affecting Hong Kong, quantum AI. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. The returns were just too good to be true, but they used deep fake AI to make it look like Elon Musk was personally endorsing the product. Nobody could tell between the fake AI and the real Elon Musk. Loads of people bought into it, and within a very short space of time, $400 million went down the pan. And then, very lastly, rug pulls and market manipulation, where the developers launch a token or a crypto platform. They build up the trust of those who are following the platform by making sort of optimistic promises, building up the whole, fattening up the pig, as I know it's called, pig butchery or pig fattening, I think it's called in slang, bigging up the whole thing, getting everybody excited, and then abruptly just pull the whole thing and the money is gone. So rug pulls effectively from under your feet, pig butchery, whatever you want to, everybody has gone. And there's an example of that. The Netflix series, Squid Games, the designers, off the back of the importance of that, designed a digital token, Squid token, inspired by that series. And the developers took something like $3 to $4 million and then just ran away with it. So it is ingenious, but it's not quite as sophisticated as the actual hacking itself. And then very lastly, before I hand back to Tim, if I've literally got a couple of minutes, is just the question, what happens then if your money is gone? How are you going to recover it? Because until fairly recently, both in the UK and Hong Kong, it was not actually that easy to recover digital currency. But the courts have since sort of woken up to, and I hope that's not in a disrespectful way, they've woken up to what needs to happen. And there have been recent authorities in both the UK and Hong Kong that digital currency is in fact property. And if it's property, it means that proprietary right therefore follows. And if that follows, then you can bring claims to, for the return, for damages, for freezing, injunctions, and so forth. But how's that going to work in a digital world? Well, actually, again, the courts and the authorities have now given effectively permission for any court order or application to be digitalized and to be airdropped or similarly served into the wallet on the blockchain. So if you're freezing an account, you're freezing a wallet, you're freezing particular cryptocurrency, those orders made by the court can be converted into digitalized tokens and actually physically dropped into the blockchain. And because the blockchain is public, it's effectively the same as being served directly on your doorstep with the papers. So that's where I got to, Tim. I hope I haven't overrun or underrun.
No, that is absolutely, thank you for that. If there's one thing that's come out of that is the sophistication of the participants in these various frauds. Now, before we chuck this open to the floor, one question I've got for Andrew. I mean, Hong Kong has got aspirations to become a crypto center, even with all the restrictions that exist in China on crypto. So what do we need to do to really make ours a watertight regulatory environment? And also, in the law enforcement agencies, I mean, this is very different from the Sweeney going after somebody with a sawn-off shotgun and a bank robber of the old school. Are they able to train, recruit, and remunerate people who are going to be able to go out against these incredibly intelligent chaps sitting in their student room in Oxford?
I think it's a really good question. I think up until, and I'm not just using the case I did as an example, but up until that case, it had never been done before. And I think they actually realized that unless they're going to invest and recruit in experts, proper experts who know what they're doing, and it's the same with the Financial Conduct Authority and the SFC here, you've got to have a proper team of experts who are ahead of the game, because without that, it's just not going to happen. And it's been allowed to happen too much in the past, to be honest. As far as Hong Kong is concerned, it's in you're in a really good place at the moment. They've just passed some further regulation in relation to stable coins. The economy is buoyant. You don't want to over-regulate it, because it's then going to just lock out all of those that see it as actually take pleasure in getting around the outside of the regulations. So you've got to find that happy balance. And I read something the other day that said Hong Kong apparently is the second happiest place to be in terms of cryptocurrency. The first place is Slovenia, so there you go. So seriously, no, it's extremely optimistic, and I think what's come out recently with the new act in relation to stablecoins, the new policy guidance that's been issued by Hong Kong, I think people are excited about it, because it's going to strike just the right balance between regulation, so that people who actually enter into that are going to be properly protected, but not to overdo it, which is going to put people off.
But stable coins are backed dollar for dollar.
Completely backed dollar for dollar.
The holder of the stable coin, whether it be Donald Trump or Kim Kardashian or something, they can actually invest that in something like property. So, but you can't then liquidate those assets.
No, you can't. It's got to be equal or greater than the value of the stable coins at any given time. And in the States at the moment, as we all know, there's a big issue over, I know being filmed, but as to whether there is a conflict between the president and his own cryptocurrency firm and the coins that have been made and the stable coins that have been made, and also deciding not to go ahead with outstanding investigations against those who might be a little bit too close to that part of the action. But it's a balance to be struck. But there's certainly suggestions that there is a conflict between what's going on and, yes, maybe I probably said too much already.
Okay. Right, let's throw this open to the floor. Any questions for Andrew? Yes, Angus. When you get the microphone, the staff will pass you a microphone. If you could just give your name, your affiliation, whether you're lawyer, barrister, financier, part of a crime syndicate, please just make yourself known. Angus.
I'm none of the above, but I am a member of the FCC, and I'm a practicing lawyer in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And I'm very happy to hear what you've said about the piles of regulations which are in place around the world in order to try and control this manifest scamming. But my question really is regulation creeping up with the is enforcement creeping up with the regulation advance? How enforceable is remedy against any of this clever attituding manipulation of the current soft focus?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think and enforcement is a good word, because I think the authorities have got the tools to enforce. They need to use the tools to enforce, and they can't. I mean, certainly in the UK, part of the problem with the scamming that's going on, and it's on an industrial scale, as I say, not just crypto, it's right the way across the board, is they're not keeping up with it because they're not putting enough emphasis or funding into it, because it's just so vast. As far as the crypto side of it's concerned, there needs to be a show of strength, as there was in the case that I was involved in the UK. They can't just use that as a trophy and stand back. They've got to keep up with it. And I know for a fact, about a year or so ago, the Financial Conduct Authority were advertising for further crypto experts to try and keep up. But they've got to keep up with it, because if they don't, it will get away from them. It's so easy. I mean, if you now can get, I hope you won't mind me saying, you said you had how many text messages from DPD or whatever it was?
DHL.
DHL?
Yeah, well, since we had lunch yesterday.
Yeah, four text messages from DHL. One, in fact, which was
One was
proved
genuine,
to be genuine, but the rest weren't. And it's going to be impossible to keep up with that, I think, as you go along, because police forces have not got they haven't got the funding, they haven't got the time. There was something called Action Fraud in the UK. I don't even know if it's still running now, but a God-sending sign was once you actually phoned Action Fraud and reported it, you'd never hear anything again. So I think the word has to go out that they're going to take it seriously, particularly on the crypto front.
Next question. Is that okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. Fabian Lischka. I used to run a cryptocurrency market making startup on the technical side.
Yeah.
Now I work for a traditional financial firm. And I have a computer science background. So I can say, I think, with some conviction that crypto blockchain has zero technological merit. And my question is really, why is, given all the fraud you've enumerated, and that was just the tip of the iceberg, why is there not more regulatory pushback? Like, for example, in China. I rarely point to China as an example of good policy, but I think in this case they really got it right. Why is the regulator so enthralled to doing all sorts of legal stuff? You sprinkle a bit of blockchain over it, and then it's, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
And just very briefly to add, I think it has basically no legitimate use cases. It's purely there to circumvent rules and regulation. And if there are legitimate use cases, traditional banks could easily fulfill them if they were allowed to do so by regulation.
I mean, can I turn that back on you, because you've obviously you've got a background in that particular field. I just could.
No.
Sorry.
Can you bring the mic back?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you ban it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You would.
And by the way, so there's this book by Kenneth Rogoff, The Curse of Cash. He's arguing for even banning, physical cash, at least large denomination notes, what of course some central banks have been doing. And so yeah, I would, I think if the whole industry went away, there'd be basically no loss except for criminals and by and large. So yeah, I would ban it.
Does anybody agree? Does anybody agree with that? Yeah. I mean, does it remain? I mean, in my sort of view, it's lost its attraction in the sense of, or it's lost its novelty in the sense it's been around now and it's being treated like anything else.
But it's still security. I mean, that's a bit of paper.
Yeah,
it's backed by something.
It's backed by something, absolutely. But would you wipe it out? I mean, should it go? Has it had its day?
Would your chambers take payments in crypto?
Oh, absolutely. Take payment in any form. Just to let everybody know. No. I don't think, I mean, Harry, where's Harry? Have we taken payments in crypto?
No. Okay.
No.
One question, as the microphone's there. We'll do
hi.
Yeah.
Hi. CUHK Faculty of Law. I've been teaching about Bitcoin for like 13 years.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit tired of it because I'm also, you were talking a lot about scamming.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, I mean, you can scam with or without crypto.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I fully agree with my predecessor, previous speaker. But, okay, liability of the person, the user, the consumer, the investor, whatever we should be using. I mean, if you're not paying attention at the website address, if you're, I'm so sorry to be saying this, if you're silly enough to fall for some young, very pretty lady or lady boy or boy who's asking you for money, to what extent should a person like this be protected? Blockchain or not?
No, absolutely. I mean, which is why I was trying to say it's not just restricted
to... So, but I mean, use the responsibility also like with safeguarding the private key, and people do really stupid things with the private key.
Absolutely. But
so what's the, I mean, like in terms of policy, protecting the Bitcoin crypto holders / consumers / investors. Thank you.
No, not at all.
Stupidity is not a defense.
No, it's not. And in the same way as people find themselves, and particularly the vulnerable, find themselves effectively being marched down to the bank to make payments, or you have a knock on the door to an elderly person, I'm your roofer, you owe me £2,000. I mean, whether it's cryptocurrency or whether it's cash or whether it's, people get scammed. There's no, for my part, there's no difference to it being crypto or to normal. So I feel no need to get rid of crypto. It's innovative, but you're going to get scammed. People are going to get scammed, whether it's through typo squatting or whether it's through the DHL parcel. You're right. You've just got to be careful and try and protect yourself. And to what extent are people responsible for their own mistakes?
Yes, the front here. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that very interesting talk. I'm a forensic accountant with Alvarez and Marsal.
Andrew.
Henry, yeah.
Oh, Henry, sorry.
Yes, Henry Chambers.
Yeah. Henry, I was going to refer anyone to you if the question has got too difficult.
So I've spent the kind of last 5 or 6 years at least doing investigations into crypto-related fraud, doing the blockchain forensics, and indeed have spent the last 3 years working on the FTX bankruptcy. So very familiar with the inside workings of that. My question actually is more to the experience. I'd not heard of the IOTA case before, and I thought that was really interesting, you sharing that. One thing I just wanted to kind of dive in a little further. You talked about the clustering that was done by the prosecution. Inherently, I'm aware that there's some problems with that. It's probabilistic, potentially, and so you cannot, with kind of all 100% confidence, say those fund flows. Is that something that you attacked in the defence?
We would have done if we'd had a trial and hadn't, and that's why, having changed from it wasn't me, Gov, to actually, it was me, but someone hacked my computer, and literally redrafted a defence statement, which is where you set out your client's case, or rather your client sets out his or her case in a statement to the prosecution. So we changed from it wasn't me to it was me, but my computer was hacked. And by the way, these are the vulnerabilities in your case, of which that was one. And the reason why it was still quite strong is because it wasn't just the clustering, it was when you put it all together circumstantially. And as we all know who work in these types of cases, sometimes circumstantial evidence is a lot stronger when you put it all together than just simply a piece of evidence which connects you to it. So no, we had identified that. And it also, as well as that, it was a journey into the unknown for the prosecution, because we had a jury of 12 people who had been selected to try this case from all walks of life. Would they have followed the technical side of it? In my experience, juries are pretty good. I prosecute and I defend. And I think if the advocates are up to the job, whichever side you're on, then the jury are pretty good about picking up. So it would have been interesting to see if it had the trial where we got to. And frankly, it would have been nice to have had the trial. But in the end, because of we pressed the buttons that caused alarms, the prosecution were happy to come to the table on something which they probably wouldn't have done if we hadn't redone things. So I agree with you. On itself, clustering techniques are not 100%, but when you put it together, it becomes quite,
Just at the front there, yep.
Andrew, I'm Barry Hoy from Robertson's.
Barry, nice to see you again. How are
Good to see you too. I've just got a notional question as a practitioner. Chasing after recovery and enforcement of judgments. Would you agree that in these circumstances, jurisdiction, that meaning jurisdiction to issue and pursue proceedings, is become less significance?
Yes,
it's no longer important. What is important is where the victim is, that is the choice of venue to pursue proceedings, because there's no point in getting an order to serve out. And there's no point because you can now get an order to serve persons unknown.
I absolutely agree with you.
And then the second thing is when you get your order, be it from an American court or a Hong Kong court or a Singapore court or a UK court, you can then tokenize it, put it on the blockchain.
Yes.
And you don't need to worry about. So jurisdiction is effectively going out the window almost.
I absolutely agree with you, Barry.
Okay, it's just...
and it's been literally revelatory, to be honest.
Yes.
The service, as you say, I think the case in the UK was AAA versus persons unknown, where they got the worldwide freezing order, victim in the jurisdiction, straight on the blockchain, job done. And there have been several since then. And for the likes of the cases that you're mentioning, it has made it so much easier.
That's
and that's how it should be. So
yes.
in a sense, for my part, allow crypto and blockchain and everything to continue, but make it easier to trace and make it easier to bring those who abuse it to justice, which I know sounds...
So everybody in the room, please breathe a sigh of relief.
Thanks, Barry.
We've got time for one more. Yes, here we are.
Yeah, I'm just on that. I'm just to sort of think about comparing to a different technology, which was sort of came up and did sort of the same thing, voice over IP. One of the key things that the voice over IP companies had to deal with was lawful intercept, which is, I think, sort of analogous here, and where they had to say, we will let the feds or the police actually listen to calls, if there's a legal reason to do it. So that feels to me somewhat analogous, and it goes again to this question of can you use this? So are there a set of things, I mean, is it just this one thing of being able to serve anybody, or are there other capabilities like lawful intercept, which would say, you'd be able to say, okay, well, because we're offering these three things, we're now able to be regulated properly without being so circumvented? Is it just the ability to serve, or is there more?
No, I mean, in terms of intercept, that's a whole different sort of story, because for understandable reasons, certainly in the UK, the authorities have to be very careful about that. And most of the time, in any criminal or civil proceedings, you're not even allowed to ask whether there's been intercept evidence conducted. It's sensitive material. And any the results of any tapping are not disclosed to the opposite party, and they won't even get to know that a tap has taken place. So I think we'd have to put bugging, tapping, or whatever you want to call it, to one side. But as far...
I just worked in the US.
Yeah.
We had to deal with, the feds would come and just, does your technology let us do that?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest economy in the world.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if there's an analogy.
Well, all I'd say is I wouldn't start tapping anybody's phones or any other devices to anybody, because it's a criminal offence. But I think they are beginning to for the reasons Barry's identified, I think they are beginning to catch up now. And in terms of the regulation, they're going to be looking at those sorts of things, primarily for the protection of users. They're going to be looking at anti-money laundering as well, to make sure that there's not dirty money going through. And it's going to be a sort of, the impression I got from the policy directive that's just come out in Hong Kong is that there is going to be further direction, but it's going to be aimed at specifically protecting that type of personnel, but without wrapping it in such tight regulation that it's going to put people off. I mean, it'd be interesting doing this a year ahead and seeing where we got to. I mean, I actually feel quite buoyant about it, but it's not shared by everyone, and I completely understand.
But that's quite that evolving landscape. It's sort of part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got no idea. Right, we're going to sort of draw a line under everything here. Andrew, thank you very much
for
very informative, enlightening, in a subject that is extremely complex, but it's not going to go away. Just before you all depart, again, I'd like to say thank you all for coming. For those of you who are not members of the Foreign Correspondents Club, we'd love you to join. You don't have to be a correspondent. In fact, we are unique amongst membership clubs in Hong Kong in having an unofficial lawyer's corner in the bar downstairs. So do feel free. Application forms and brochures are available as you leave, and we'd love to see you both at our regular events and also to join as members. So, Andrew, thank you very much.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
We never let anybody leave the FCC empty-handed.
Oh, my goodness.
So there is a small remembrance of your visit.
Cryptocurrency.
It's not FCC crypto. No, we're not going to do that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. And thank you very much for
And thanks again.
attention to us. Thank you. And that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you all, mate. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks, Tim. That's still on.